content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. He'd snapped both his legs straight off in the fall, causing his splintered shins to impale the soil like a couple of organic javelins. Doctors and nurses, what's the worst thing you've seen on the job? We asked a buddy of mine from medical school what is the worst thing he's seen so far. His answer: I was interning and a middle-aged prostitute came in. The chick complained of a rash. The doctor asks her to lift her skirt and he finds a flaming genital herpes breakout in her vajayjay. He treats her and the doctor decides to look her over more carefully. When he tried to lift her shirt, she resists. He talks to her for a bit and she finally allows him to look. Lo and behold, he finds a hole in her stomach with herpes all over it and inside. The chick was letting Johns have sex with her colostomy hole. A homeless paraplegic woman was brought into the ER for pneumonia. We had to strip off all of her dirty clothes and put her in a hospital gown. As I took her pants off, I noticed a cockroach, which I thought was weird. As we took her panties off, out came the swarm. Roaches had nested in her vagina and she couldn't feel it because of the paralysis. Nursing student here, had to insert a catheter into a pretty obese lady, saw a black string hanging from her vagina. I asked her if she had a tampon in and she said, "Oh, I hope it's not still there." I ended up having to pull it out and the stench will be with me forever. Not to mention the white pus and brown slime covering a now black tampon. Apparently she hadn't had a period in months, so who knows how long it was in there. My sister, gynecologist, told me this one girl comes to hospital, complains that she's unusually smelly down there. Sister takes a look, sure enough there is something not right there. Upon further inspection my sister notices there is an object deep inside her. "Sister, there seems to be something stuck inside your vagina, do you know what it could be? I'm going to take it out." Patient: "No, please don't touch that. It's the cap to my deodorant. I'm keeping it there as a contraceptive." Sister: "What?" RN for 15 plus years. Puke, poop, pee and infected wounds are common and rarely even bother me anymore. I've seen some nasty stuff over the years. Too many to remember, and to be honest I hope not to remember most of these. But they won't go away. Number 1. Burn victim, had his face, ears, eyes, nose burned off. Yet he could still communicate by nodding. Poor guy. Don't know if he lived or not. The smell of burnt flesh was still there. And wow. Doing wound care was an exercise in sadism. Number 2. Heart surgery patient. Things went bad in the OR and basically the upper lobe of this guy's lung migrated out of the ribcage. Basically think of a balloon you can see inflating and deflating under the skin of the guy's chest. The visual aspect wasn't so disturbing, but I was asked to assist in suctioning the patient. It was my job to hold the lung, kind of put pressure on it. The feeling of that lung expanding under the pressure of my hands is something I doubt I'll forget. And you'd be surprised at how strong that lung is when the patient coughed. I had to put some moderate pressure to the site. Number 3. Morbidly obese patient who asked for assistance wiping her butt after pooping. I asked how she managed at home by herself. I use a towel between my legs and pull it up and down. A different morbidly obese patient told a coworker that she had her daughter wipe her butt for her. Some people. Number 4. Flesh-eating bacteria patient. When I saw this guy he was almost dead. He had his leg amputated up to the hip socket, he had most of his right abdominal wall removed as well. I did wound care. It was crazy taking off all those bandages, and when I peeled back the last layer, well, that was an anatomy lesson right there. This case bothered me for 2 reasons. 1. The obvious damage to the body. Secondly was how fast the infection progressed. I took care of this guy 7 days after his initial wound, which was a scratch on his leg while out walking in his fields. Get scratched. 7 days later you're basically dead. Life is fragile. Number 5. Homeless dude brought into the ED. Nurse removes his clothes and what do they find? Maggots. Yes. Maggots living under this guy's jeans. Number 6. A poop story for you all. I won't forget this guy. He lived, but for 3 days I thought he was going to die any second. Bottom line is this guy had emergency surgery, had massive blood loss and low blood pressure for hours. Like I said. Thought he was a goner, but he lived. About 12 days after surgery this guy has a bowel movement. This was stuff like no other I'd seen, or have seen since. First the visual, it looked like translucent worms. Chunks of translucent worms. But nothing else. I assumed it was the intestines shedding a layer of skin. No fecal matter. Now the smell. Well, after working in a hospital for 10 plus years you smell all kinds of foul nasty stuff. Yes, it bothers you, but you do get used to it. This guy's poop was the most foulest smelling substance ever. Rotting meat, poop, God, I don't even know. All I know is that was the first time and last time I've actually puked in my mouth from doing my job. Number 7, now a humorous poop story. Was working night shift, busy as hell, and had this elderly lady that wanted to get on the commode. I helped her on it and gave her the call button to push when she's done. Well, time goes by and I realize it's been an hour, so I go check on her. She isn't done yet. I check on her 30 minutes later. Not done yet. Check again 30 minutes later and she's done. I get her back to bed and go to empty the commode, and what do I see? 10 to 15 perfectly round poop balls. The balls were the size of ping pong balls, yet perfectly round. That was unusual, but being busy as hell, I didn't even question it. How the hell do you have perfectly round poop? To this day I don't know, but it still gives me a laugh. I am an EMT, so not a doctor or nurse. But this story makes even my ER surgeon friends nauseous. A few years back I got a call over my radio saying that there was a trapped woman in her home who needed medical assistance. I was the first responder, so I go into the house with my bag and immediately am hit by a wall of stench. Now, this odor is not just the, "Oh God, you need to air this place out" odor. It's the sweet mother of God, I can taste it, it's in my eyes, I have to burn the clothes I'm wearing odor. Obviously this woman was some kind of hoarder. There were cats everywhere. They were just sitting on top of poop that had piled up in the house. There was cat poop on the walls, the floor. I saw families of cockroaches skittering around. Disgusting. So I called out to identify myself as a paramedic, and I hear this woman calling me from down the hallway. As I pick my way through the house, the odor just gets worse. It was like someone pooped, covered themselves in baby vomit, and then rolled around in a field of rotting flesh. I come to an open door and lo and behold there is the woman. Or should I say whale? This woman had to weigh at least 450 pounds. She was naked, covered in poop, and wedged between her toilet and her bathtub. I nearly lost my goddamn mind. The desire to vomit was so intense. I asked her what happened, donned my gloves, as well as a mask, and started to think of how the hell I was going to get this woman out. I'm not small, 5 feet 8 inches, 155 pounds woman. But damn, I'm not Hercules. It's about this time that more EMTs start arriving, as well as a few cops. This rookie cop comes racing in, sees this woman covered in poop, and vomits right onto her. This sets off a chain reaction. The woman begins to vomit, more EMTs and cops come in, and everyone is vomiting. I'm standing in an inch of vomit juices that is now mingling with poop, and I'm just trying to figure out what to do. Turns out we had to call the fire department, get the jaws of life, and rip the toilet out. We didn't have a stretcher that could support this woman's weight, so we had to improvise. When we got to the ER, the doctors and nurses looked so incredibly disgusted. Now, keep in mind we're covered in poop and vomit, with that horrible odor of the house clinging to us. We had to go into a decontamination room to get cleaned. Worst day ever. Not as gross as some stories I've read, but this is when my mother told me after a night working the ER. A guy came in with his penis broke sideways. He said my girlfriend got a little too excited. Another one where my dad was driving an ambulance. It was time to remove a cast for a very large woman who broke her leg. He was sent to pick her up. She never got up from her chair since getting out of the hospital. For months she pooped and peed herself in her recliner. My mother is the one who removed the cast. The cast was full of cockroaches and roach eggs. They said the ambulance and the exam room smelled for days. Alright, this one is really, really bad. Like, really bad. Do not read this if you're pregnant, your spouse is pregnant, or you are trying to get pregnant. I'm an EMT, and this is my worst story. Back when I was fairly new to running emergency calls, back when I was an EMTB, and they called them EMTBs, my partner and I got a call for a woman who was in premature labor and bleeding. We grabbed another person on scene to drive, since we wanted to concentrate on the woman. We'd do the usual things, IV, blood pressure, which was really high, strap in for transport, etc. This is where things go very, very wrong. While we're on the way to an ER, her blood pressure starts to spike even higher, and she's involuntarily pushing. Her entire uterus detaches internally and falls out. Literally. I don't know how much people know about the blood flow required for pregnancy, but when a woman is pregnant all sorts of veins and arteries are formed attaching the fetus to the womb, and the blood flow to the womb is enormous. So we're there in the back of the bus, everything is covered in blood. Like, coated. There's a pool of blood on the floor we're splashing in. The mother is, of course, unconscious or dead. We don't even know. The only thing we could do was basically put the womb back in the woman and hold pressure until we got to the hospital. Obviously, neither the woman nor the child survived. And we literally had to remove blood from our rig for 8 hours. The entirety of our remaining shift. It even coated the ceiling. And that's my worst story. Nothing has ever topped it, and I don't think anything ever will. I'm really happy I don't have nightmares, because I know my partner did. A friend who is a field medic in the army told me this story. While he was in training at a military hospital, they would provide free medical attention to civilians that couldn't afford it on their own. He said that a black woman in her 70s came in with what turned out to be a prolapsed rectum. But that's not the interesting part. When they went to roll her onto her side, one of the guys grabbed her arm and it just flopped freely like it was just hanging on by skin. They freaked and said, "Are you okay? Does that hurt?" She replied, "Nah, that's no big deal. I just have a bad arm." As it turns out, when she was 16 years old, she fell down and completely dislocated her shoulder. They didn't have access to medical attention, so she just lived with it like that for 50+ years. She just conceded that she would never use that arm. He said that it could have been reset very easily without surgery, if they would have taken care of it when it happened. This story makes me so sad every time I think of it. A friend of mine worked in a psych ward. On a night shift, a guy jumped from the second floor, not sure how he got out, I never asked. The nurses ran out, and was surprised to find him standing on the lawn outside. He was screaming his throat out, but was still standing upright for some reason. As they got closer, they realized why. He'd snapped both his legs straight off in the fall, causing his splintered shins to impale the soil like a couple of organic javelins. My friend still shudders when referring to the blood, the creaking of the bones, and the